Chapter 92, The Hidden Knife. The Hidden Knife.
Vuldrin, you have returned. I heard of the commotion at the temple, but...
Frithia closed eyes, trying to ignore the feeling that she was dooming them all as she handed over the soft hide bag, Feyre immediately opening it on 3 bright, silver, and ever so genuine eggs. Her soft gasp of delight sent a cold dread shivering over her.
Ah, you are a marvel, my beautiful Vuldrin, you are, indeed. Thank you, you have performed well.
Feyre was smiling, as genuine as the eggs she held, and, for a moment, all the soft beauty of her face was allowed to shine through, Frithia given a glimpse of the woman whom Solafane had once loved. But it did not last, the smile taking on a hungry cruelty as Feyre laughed.
And just think, this time tomorrow and I will be the new matron of House Despanna.
She moved over to the table where a long case was waiting, the heavy dark stone glowing with an enchanted heat.
There,
Feyre sighed, letting long fingers run over the silver shell with a gentle affection as she placed the last egg within.
I commissioned this case for them that they may be kept at temperature without a brazier. Our prize is no good to us if it is dead.
The woman turned back to her, face stern once more and perhaps even a little guarded. Vuldrin was, after all, the one person left in that city who could still ruin her plans.
Now go. The ritual will be performed tomorrow night, I will send for you when the time comes. Yes, mistress.
Frithia gazed up at the building she had just left, trying to imagine where Feyre was now hiding her treasure, the prize that would bestow upon her control of that house, power over that entire city. The pity was, she could certainly think of worse people to rule it. Frithia sighed and turned to continue her path back to the inn, the streets quiet at that early hour of the morning. The fact their end seemed so certain now had left her feeling rather calm, as though just doing her best, whatever the outcome, was all any could expect of her. Their room was just as she had left it, tense. Imoen was knelt upon the hearth rug playing distractedly with the 3 fake eggs, Valigar pacing behind the sofa where Ari was flipping back and forth through her spell books, desperate to find something that could help them, Herr Dallas next to her and trying not to fidget, while Inomen stood in the far corner watching Jaehaera and Minsk's very heated discussion.
Who says we never should have handed over those eggs? Well, then who wants to get us all killed? Come the morning, Feyre would have merely arrived here looking for them and she would not have come alone or, indeed, peaceably. Come the morning, young Ari may have found a way to fix the eggs or unseal the gates. Only Matron Argelis can unseal those gates, Minsk, even. Frithia!
Exclaimed Inomen, marching over to her at the sound of the door.
What happened? Did Feyre say anything?
Frithia shrugged, mildly taking a chair and everyone seemed to gather about her.
Only that the ritual will be performed tomorrow night, or I suppose tonight actually, since it's the morning now, however early.
Ari gave a miserable moan, Imoen shaking her head.
Oh, not good, this is not good.
Jaehaera was on her feet, trying to regain some semblance of calm in the increasing air of panic.
Now, just listen, everyone.
A bright flash, Ari's small scream making more than one of them start.
What, by Sylvanus?
But Jaehaera's question was already answered, the smoke instantly dissipated by its flapping wings as a small blue imp appeared in their midst, the creature shaking his head like a disappointed tutor as it gazed down at Frithia.
Oh, Mistress Adeline is not very happy with you, Godling. Her eggs are still in peril, and she is threatening to end the illusion. We had no choice,
cried Imoen.
If we had given Feyre the fakes, we'd have been discovered straight away. We're going to get them back, we just need more time.
The imp looked doubtful. Frithia sighed.
If Adalin ends our illusion now, then we will definitely be unable to rectify this, and she will lose her eggs for certain. Return to your mistress, tell her to be patient, we will retrieve them yet. Mistress Adalin will not like that. Yeah, well, Mistress Adalin can just fa. Imoen. Oh, Adalin was right to pick you peoples, you are just like Drow, all bicker and squabble. I will tell her, but she won't be happy.
Jaehaera sighed tiredly.
Are any of us?
The imp regarded her a moment, seeming trying to decide whether an answer to this was expected, before he gave up either way and he was gone. Fritha drew a deep breath, it was time to remember who she had been.
Right, the eggs are delivered to Feyre, now we just have to see about getting them back. You make it sound so simple,
snorted Valigar.
Do I? I doubt it will be, but I shall try to keep the plan so. As I see it, we have two problems. Since we are trapped here until Argelis is dead, Feyre needs to believe everything is continuing according to her plan. Therefore, we need some decent forgeries that we can exchange for the real eggs and, once we have those, it will be a matter of gaining access to Feyre's apartments. Where only you have ever been,
Imoen reminded with more than a little resentment. Fritha refused to bite.
Feyre holds quarters on the top floor of the Female Fighters Society, not so difficult to find, for there is only one staircase up, but it has many people coming and going at most hours, getting in and out unseen will be difficult, and then, of course, there is searching her apartment. But that is all incidental while we have nothing to exchange for the eggs.
Minsk sent Jaehaera a mutinous glare, but said nothing. Fritha ignored it, letting her eyes drift over them, this decision perhaps the most important she had made yet.
Jaehaera, Anomen, Imoen, and Minsk, you will go back to the shop that served as Jarlaxle's cover and try to make contact with him. Jarlaxle!
Exclaimed Anomen,
that drow rogue? We do not even know if it was he who planned this treachery from the beginning. He did not do this,
stated Fritha evenly.
But... No,
interrupted Jaehaera.
Fritha is right. The man is well reputed to be driven by coin and I see little way for him to profit by this betrayal.
She glanced to the girl next to her.
You will not be attending, as well.
Fritha shook her head.
Feyre was nervous when last we spoke, I do not know if she is watching us, but it may look suspicious if we go anywhere as a group. The rest of us will wait here for your return. Whether you can contact Jarlaxle and find some way to replace the eggs will determine the rest of our plans. And if we can't?
Asked Ari quietly. Jaehaera was quick to bolster them, her desire to fulfill her promise and take the burden of it from Fritha heartening the girl more than any of her words.
Then we will have to consider a new route to the eggs. Do not worry, this situation is not so bleak. We could betray Feyre to Argelis, kill the matron before the ritual, even take the eggs from Feyre as she means to present them to the demon. As long as the eggs survive, there is hope.
Their talks ended, everyone rose in a brief flurry of activity, those who were going making preparations to leave. Imoen threw her bag across her shoulders and crossed to the door of her chamber, Fritha glancing up from the desk as she entered.
So, we're off then,
Imoen began, her voice falsely hearty, brimming with a confidence she did not possess.
It feels strange that you're not coming along, though.
Fritha just nodded, closing to her to pat her shoulder, she would never get used to them being the same height.
Jarlaxle will likely help you, though his aid may come at a price. But, as Jaehaera said, this is not our only hope. No,
the girl agreed shrewdly,
but it's our best one, even with having to sneak back into Feyre's place to swap the eggs afterwards.
Fritha sent her a contemplative look. Someone would need to know.
Yes. She had a long stone case ready waiting for them, infused with a heat of its own, so she did not even need to keep the eggs over a fire. Feyre's apartments are not so spacious though, just 3 rooms and not much furniture to clutter them up.
Fritha smiled slightly to the girl before her.
I'm sure a keen eye would be able to find them.
Imoen snorted.
If you mean someone nosy like me, then just say so.
They shared a smile, the first in a long while. It could not last.
Imoen,
called Jaehaera from the other room. Fritha gave her shoulder another bracing slap.
Time for you to go.
Imoen nodded, sharp face lit with a new intensity.
We won't let you down. I know. Just remember, Imoen, this act sometimes requires sacrifices.
Imoen laughed, already half turned to go.
Don't worry, Jaehaera has all our coin ready to bribe him with. Hells, I'll give Jarlaxle everything but the tunic I'm stood in, if he'll fix those eggs. Well, we're here,
snapped Imoen, feeling the pressure of what was resting on them weighing heavily on her as she gazed about the now empty shop, the bare shelves and tables bearing no hint of the goods they had once held. Fritha had made it sound so simple, just go there and find a means to contact him.
What in hells are we supposed to do now?
A gnomon was scanning about the room vainly, looking as fraught as she.
Perhaps there is something left, some clue as to where he has gone or a means to contact him.
Minsk frowned.
Who says we will find nothing here? Well, that's not very helpful, Boo,
snapped the druid.
Magic drew us from this place before, perhaps there is a way to trace the energies back to where Jarlaxle makes his stronghold.
Imoen felt the impatience quiver through her, the magic's building.
We don't have time for this. We need to find Jarlaxle and we need to find him now.
Imoen blinked, shaking the static from her hair as she gazed about her at the familiarly opulent room, the 2 men seated at the table glancing up to them with an equal surprise. Jarlaxle recovered first, brushing an indiscernible spot of dust from his sleeve as he rose to greet them.
Well, I did not expect to see you again. Where is your leader, Fritha? Never you mind,
snapped Minsk, ignoring Jaehaera's quelling look.
We have need to speak with you. Clearly, the rogue offered coolly, you are fortunate I am still about. Now what is it you want? Want?
Repeated Imoen sharply.
I hope for your sake you truly don't know, mate.
Jarlaxle frowned.
I do not believe I like your tone, my lady.
Imoen could not have cared less, the girl thrusting one of eggs at him angrily.
These forgeries you gave us, perfect in every way barring one minor flaw.
Flame burst around her hand, licking about the egg and slowly the word emerged, glowing gold upon the silver surface. Jarlaxle looked genuinely troubled.
Ah. Well, Visage, you did say we should have paid that artisan rather than blackmailing him.
The man next to him dipped his head in measure apology.
I regret my insight. Well, then, let me see,
Jarlaxle continued briskly, taking the egg from Imoen's outstretched hand and giving it a glance over before presenting it to the mage.
What do you make of it, Visage? It is a charm upon the surface, rather than a part of the egg itself. I may be able to remove it, in time. Well, you had best get started then,
Jarlaxle dismissed merrily,
and order a couple of the men to go and pay the artisan a visit. We can't have him swaggering about believing to have duped us, can we?
Jaehaera wordlessly handed the mage the small hide bag and he disappeared in a flash. Jarlaxle already moving to take a seat at the table.
Well, now, while we are waiting, perhaps a drink?
They joined him reluctantly, though more from feelings of their own urgency than any worries regarding his hospitality. The pot passed about the table as each of them served themselves with the tea that he and Visage had been drinking but moments before.
Well,
Jarlaxle continued once all were settled,
now this minor crisis is well in hand, though I wonder what you plan once you have the fakes. Are you still in a position to just hand them to your patron?
Anomen shook his head.
No. Feyre required delivery of the eggs hours ago and we were forced to present to her the real ones. They are hidden now in her apartments. Ah, an unfortunate situation,
Jarlaxle sighed, taking an unconcerned sip of tea.
Still, she will be unable to assign guards to her rooms without drawing suspicion. If the eggs are within, it will take something considerable to drag Feyre from her apartments. Of course, you could always attempt to search them with her there, perhaps distracted by one of your company.
He offered, an eyebrow raised to Minsk. The ranger looked deeply perturbed. Jarlaxle shrugged,
though that in itself bears its own risks. But, either way, I wish you well in the endeavor. Oh, you'll do a lot more than that, mate. Imoen.
Jaehaera hissed, but the girl's temper would not be silenced, Minsk seeming more than willing to back up her words.
No, Jaehaera, his minor crisis could have got us all killed. The way I see it, you owe us.
Jarlaxle sent Imoen a cool look.
I do not take kindly to orders, even from ladies as pretty as yourself. Ha! You have no idea, this body is nothing compared to the one I left. You would be falling over yourself to do my bidding. You know it's going to be impossible to get into Feyre's without help. You expect me to join with you?
He asked incredulously. Imoen snorted her derision.
I wouldn't have you if you offered. Lend us your rope.
Jarlaxle paused to draw another sip, clearly mulling this over.
Well now. I would not usually bow to such requests, but, I will agree that in crossing me, this artisan has caused you some difficulties. 8 surfacers against the twisting intrigues of city's most powerful house. I always was one for the underdog.
He grinned suddenly, raising his cup.
All right, let us drink to it.
The others had been gone for hours now. Ari leaned into the man next to her, Herdalis patting her hand though he kept his eyes closed, trying to take what little rest he could seated there with her on the sofa, Valigar pacing the floor behind, while Fritha was curled in the chair next to the empty fire pit. She had left the room about an hour after the others had, returning a few moments later with ale for them all before going quietly back to her book. Ari let her eyes drift to her, the girl reading steadily, seemingly unconcerned by the fears that pressed on the rest of them, though for all that, she seemed sad. Perhaps she had already accepted their fate, she had been facing her own demise for over a 10-day now, maybe the idea had simply lost its sting. Behind her, Valigar sighed tersely.
We should be doing something. Not just stood here waiting. Nothing can be done until our hounds return with news,
reasoned Herdalis wearily.
Then we will know our next step. They must have found Jarlaxle by now, they would have returned otherwise. Do you think he's helping them then?
Asked Ari. She wished Valigar would just sit down, his pacing was making her feel all the more nervous. Herdalis shrugged.
Either that or he has killed them. Herdalis, don't. Jarlaxle won't have killed them,
offered Fritha quietly.
He may have demanded another favor for his aid though, we must just be patient.
She glanced up from her book.
The fates will provide. Well, this sparrow just wishes they would provide with a little more haste.
Hammering on the door made them all start, though Fritha seemed to be expecting it, the girl rising slowly, eyes fixed on the portal opposite.
Remember yourselves.
The door burst open before anyone had a chance to cross and open it, two guards taking a place either side as Feyre stalked through looking angrier than Ari had ever seen her, the woman reaching Fritha to strike her viciously across the face, her nails scoring the dark flesh.
Did you think I would not find out? Find out what?
Cried Fritha, voice waving between outrage and fear.
You took him to your bed. What? What are you speaking of? Solifane!
Screamed Feyre,
you bedded that worm. There are rumors of it all over the tavern.
Ari felt her heart stop, and just who had been the source of that? Fritha was defiant.
They lie, I never took that wretch to my bed. Ask him yourself.
Feyre's face froze and a silent understanding seemed to pass between the two women.
He is missing, so they say at the Male Fighters Society. I did not lie with him,
pressed Fritha. Feyre's face twisted with a cold smile.
Is that so? Well, let us see if the handmaidens can change your song. Take her. What? No!
Roared Valigar, Fritha whipping to the sound.
Silence, male!
She snapped, shaking the guards off roughly as they made to escort her.
I need not your arm.
And she marched from there, bloodied face held high, a willing accomplice in her fate. Jaehaera pushed open the door, a fierce determination trembling through her heart, the weight of those eggs pressing in the bag at her hip, Jarlaxle good on his promise to mend them, as well as affording them other aid. It would be difficult, but with the magic of his robe they just stood a chance of gaining access to Feyre's apartments and finding the eggs. The others about her could feel it too, the building hope that perhaps they could just snatch this from the fire and escape alive, this one final task barring the way between them and freedom.
We return.
Jaehaera stopped dead, unmindful of the others crowded before the door behind her as her eyes fell on the elf's tear-stained face, Hairdalis and Valigar looking little better.
Ari? What has happened? Where is Fritha? She's gone,
the girl answered tremulously.
They came, they took her. What?
Roared Minsk, barging through them, fresh tears already streaking down Ari's face.
She went downstairs after you left. I thought she had just gone to fetch some drinks, but she did something, I don't know, probably bribed one of the servers or the innkeep to start it. You would only have to tell a few people in a place like this. Tell them what?
Pressed Jaehaera, Hairdalis taking up the tale as Ari's tears caught up with her.
The raven started the rumor that she had bedded Solifane. She what? Helm's mercy,
moaned Anomen, he could clearly guess what had occurred next. The tiefling laughed nervously, looking anything but pleased.
You have to credit it to her, the raven knows exactly how to get a reaction. Feyre burst in here but half an hour ago, screaming like a succubus, and had her dragged off to the temple. And you let them?
Cried Imoen, Valigar shaking his head.
How could we stop them? He is right, Imoen,
agreed Anomen quietly, his small frame slightly hunched as though he had just taken a heavy blow to the chest.
Oh, shut up!
She snapped, already whirling to the woman next to her.
We have to do something, Jaehaera, Feyre could kill her. I do not believe that was her intention,
offered Valigar firmly.
Oh, and suddenly you're the expert on the drow, are you? No, young Imoen, Boo says there is no time for arguing now. Imoen, you don't know, you weren't here,
cried Ari.
No, cause if I was, I wouldn't have let her go.
Imoen shrieked, dropping her face into her hands to sob.
Why didn't I realize, oh, why did she have to do this?
Minsk placed a hand on her shoulder, gently patting her back.
Come now, young Imoen, Fritha is very brave, she will return to us soon.
The girl said nothing, Minsk moving back as Jahara stepped in.
Imoen, I know you are frightened for her, but Fritha did this for us, to give us a chance to find the eggs, and that is what we must do.
Silence, Jahara unable to look at girl before her, Imoen just shaking her off and mopping at her face as she turned away. A light knock rattled the door behind, breaking the stillness. A Nomen moved first, opening it on a tall cloaked form, the figure drawing back his cowl to shake out his long white hair, grey eyes grave.
I have heard. Cellophane,
gasped Ari to a background of uncomfortable glances, no one sure how to react. Fritha had always made it look so easy.
What are you doing here?
Barked Jahara, taking up the role of head female.
They said you were missing.
Cellophane frowned, closing the door behind him to gaze about them all.
Vuldrin did not tell you? Feyre instructed Vuldrin to kill me, but she refused. I agreed to disappear to further the lie of my death. She told me about you all, that you are surfacers. She told you?
Choked a Nomen, Jahara mind echoing him, though she was too stunned to form the words. The girl apparently engaged in plots as twisted as her mistresses, as she had skipped about that city without them. The drow merely nodded.
She realized I am not as others here. She said I could join you for the surface, if I wished it. When I heard she had been taken to the temple, I feared the worst. I realize now that my worries were misplaced. Feyre still believes in your illusion, though I do not understand how such a rumor began to travel the city. We think Fritha, the one you know as Vuldrin, fabricated and began the tale on purpose,
offered Jahara,
a sure way to rile Feyre. I see,
answered Cellophane after a pause, perhaps wondering why the girl had wanted to bring such trouble upon herself in the first instance.
This is all absurd,
sighed a Nomen angrily, collapsing into one of the chairs, and those about him did the same.
Feyre cannot believe it is true.
Cellophane gave an impassive shrug.
It does not matter whether it is true or not. Feyre is growing close to power, but she has got there standing on the shoulders of your Fritha. She is an asset, and so Feyre will not kill her, but she needs for her and all others to see just who is in charge. She has likely been looking to do this for a long while. It is our way. So what happens now?
Asked Imoen quietly.
Well, I would stay with you, if I may, and bind my fate to yours. Whether we escape to the surface or die trying, I am with you.
Jahara sighed and nodded once.
An extra blade is always welcome, though it is slightly more complicated than that. Here.
She continued, opening the bag at her hip to show him the shining treasure within. His jaw dropped in an almost comical surprise.
Are those fake dragon eggs? Feyre has the real ones, the ones lying in the temple at this moment are also forgeries. The dragon.
The drow concluded incisively.
I had been wondering at the power behind your illusion ever since I learned of it. You plan to use this opportunity to breach Feyre's apartments and retrieve the real eggs. I need not tell you that this will not be easy.
Imoen snorted, more herself as she corrected tartly.
No, stealing them from the temple in the first place wasn't easy. Compared to that, this will be child's play.
Jahara smiled grimly at his amazement.
I fear she may be right, these eggs were not the only things which have been gifted to us of late.
Fritha locked her jaw, her insides burning, and she could imagine the skin peeling back, her bones charring as the pain roared through her, her teeth clenched together so tight she felt the enamel would crack, the girl holding it back until the very last instant, the scream finally breaking past her will to echo gloriously about them, an aria to her determination. And her reward was swift, the pain ebbing as the crackling rods were withdrawn once more from her torso by the eager-faced handmaidens, and she was allowed to catch her breath, hanging limp and panting roughly, this game between them the same for the last 3 hours. But this time, it seemed, was the final round, Feyre's face swimming into focus as she stepped forward, the woman looking smaller from where Fritha was suspended upon the wall, the thick hide straps biting into her wrists.
That is enough, take her down.
Fritha collapsed to her hands and knees as the bonds were released, her limbs twitching fitfully. Everything hurt, the memory of the pain lingering within her body still, and it was all she could do not flinch as she felt her presence above her. White hair curtained her off from the world, though Fritha did not need to see her face to hear Feyre's smile.
Well, Vuldren, it seems you were perhaps speaking the truth, after all, though, be warned, do not give me cause to doubt you again. Guards, remove her.
The door opened at her order, the rhythmic click of her boots echoing over the tiles as Feyre's footsteps retreated back, 2 pairs of strong hands scooping her under the arms to heft her upright, and Fritha's feet barely touched the ground as they whisked her from the room, the 3 of them flying along corridors until they finally halted.
In here.
She felt the rush of air as the door was shut behind her, the room they were in small and cramped with all 3 of them squeezed inside. Someone was pushing her down, encouraging her to sit on the small stool, no doubt used to reach the higher shelves of what looked to be the store cupboard they were crowded within, rows of jars glittering in the half-light. One guard was already crouched before her, briskly rubbing some life back into her aching legs, the other stood at her side, a hand resting lightly on her shoulder as he pressed a small vial into her palm.
Here, drink this.
She glanced up, trying to focus on him through the mess of her hair, the familiar plain face looking strange in the close-fitting helmet of the temple guards.
Jehind.
He looked mildly surprised at the address.
You recall me?
She smiled hazily.
Of course, you're far prettier than that Jarlaxle fellow, they've completed the exchange. They certainly should have done.
Jarlaxle laughed.
With Feyre out of the way and my magic rope, I doubt it was even a challenge. You lent them your rope? Yes, that Imoen of yours put forward a convincing enough argument for all her cheek. It was when we returned to collect it that we heard you were here.
He smiled wryly.
Your own audacity was enough to pique my desire to see you one last time, now drink.
The liquid was bitter, a pleasant numbness washing through her body as she swallowed.
She went hard on you,
muttered the guard at her feet, his work finally finished as he rose, and Fritha could just recognize the mage, visage behind the illusion he wore.
I would not give her the satisfaction of too much screaming, thought I'd give them a decent chance to find them. Can you walk?
Asked Jarlaxle.
It will look better if you can make it out of here on your own feet. Yes, just give me a moment,
she sighed, slowly heaving herself from the stool, her mind growing clearer by the moment as the pain ebbed.
The others are back at the inn. Indeed, they are. Now come with us.
The pair of them escorted her to the entrance hall, Fritha almost herself again as they reached the huge stone doors. Jarlaxle turned to her.
And here we leave you. To say you have exceeded all my expectations would be a grave understatement.
He smiled, his verve impossible to hide behind any mask.
I sincerely hope we meet again.
Fritha limped up the last few steps and slowly opened the door. Jarlaxle's potion was wearing off, the pain making her limbs tremble, all faces whirling to her as she stumbled into their common room.
Fritha.
The scramble to vacate the sofa could have almost been amusing, though Fritha could not quite muster the energy for the emotion. She tried to lower herself onto it, her knees buckling under her own weight, and she collapsed onto the violet cushions with a shuddering sigh, slowly pushing off her boots to lie down and, for a moment, the only sound was the hoarse rasp of her breathing. Imoen's whisper stirred the hair at her ear.
Fritha, are you?
She raised trembling fingers to hold her.
Where are the eggs? Here,
came Jaehaera, her voice soft and slightly thick as though she had a cold coming on.
They are here.
A dull thud as the warm metal case was placed on the rug before her and the lid removed, the shimmering silver glow bathing her face, and she could still see their light through her eyelids as she let them flutter shut. Fritha smiled. They had won. Fritha just had fallen asleep where she lay, the girl moving from the sofa after a couple of hours to sleep the rest of the day in her own bed. It was just before midnight now, and all were gathered in their common room, making the last of their plans. According to Solafane, the Drow armies would have begun their attack just after sunset, when the light was no longer about to ravage eye and armor both. This ritual, to be held at midnight, was to be the decisive blow which would turn the battle in their favor, or, at least, it would have been. The plan had been decided a while ago, their group and the real eggs going to wait by the gates until Argilis unsealed them, either by death or design. Though even this was not simple, Fritha was likely to be called to the temple to enjoy a share of the triumph, a death sentence if any part of that tortuous plan went awry, and something that appeared to be upsetting for some of them.
But, will Feyre even want you at the ritual now, after?
Imoen trailed off, unwilling to mention what had happened, even if it was the basis of her argument. Fritha still clearly thought so. She had risen an hour ago to wash and dress for the occasion, the girl now wearing a deep violet tunic as she knelt before the large mirror Valigar had carried through from her room. Ari stood behind her and using the combs Feyre had gifted her to pin her hair into an elaborate arrangement of loops and braids, her still cheek bearing the 3 swollen ridges from where the woman had clawed her. And it seemed Solafane was in agreement with Fritha, the man nodding wisely as he answered Imoen's doubts.
Oh, Feyre will want her there. She will want to prove her power to all, and to Valdrin too.
He laughed grimly.
That I could be there also, when she realizes she is betrayed. Yeah, well, she deserves it and more.
Spat Imoen. For the first time in a long while, Fritha spoke.
Feyre does what she must, just as we all do.
Solafane was watching her reflection with an unreadable look, Anomen noticing to turn away, Imoen oblivious as she set to contest the point.
But
a knock on the door halted her, Jaehaera moving to answer it and barely opening it a foot, the room behind shielded from view by her long frame.
It is a summons,
she said finally, passing the note the messenger had given her to Fritha.
You are expected in the temple immediately.
The girl stared at her reflection, as though, for a moment, trying to picture how she had looked before.
There is none so sharp as the knife that comes from behind. Come.
She sighed, rising stiffly.
It is time to finish this. All of you, take the eggs.
The cries of outrage halted her.
No, Fritha. If the plan fails, you will have no chance of escape alone.
The girl sighed.
And will it be any better a chance if I allow some of you to accompany me?
She shook her head, seemingly too tired to argue with them.
Ah, as you will it. I will take 2 others with me, Jahara and Imoen. No, I will not hear any more.
She shouted over the barrage of voices.
I can't take any men with me and you know it, so take that glare from your face for a start, Minsk. The rest of you go with Solafane and wait by the main gates in the marketplace. They should unseal once Argilus is dead. Go immediately to Odilon, I will not hear any protests on this, Anomen. Wait with the dragon for a quarter hour, no longer. If we have not arrived by then you are to go without us.
She glanced to the only true drow among them.
Solafane can guide you to the surface. But, a quarter hour is so little time,
pleaded Ari. It was Jahara, who refused her.
If we do not return then something will have gone wrong and you will need the longest head start possible if you are to escape. This is greater than just us, Irenicus must be stopped. He attacks Sultanaseller now, who knows where we'll be next.
The streets were deserted, the group parting ways in a whispered flurry of assurances as Fritha turned to lead them deeper into the city. The temple was alive with light, every window glowing in a rainbow of colors, purples, reds and blues, and they could hear the prayers of the priestesses even outside, the air thrumming with the chants of worship to their divine Spider Queen. Feyre was awaiting them in the entrance hall, the woman smiling as she saw her, the pearls coiled about her neck rattling lightly as she nodded her greeting, both women wearing their alliance, though no other could read it, and if Fritha had felt as though she had at any point betrayed Feyre, it was then.
Vuldren, you are arrived, good. The ritual will begin soon. Oh, and you have brought an entourage.
Fritha nodded.
Just a precaution should we meet any resistance, I can have them wait outside if... No,
Feyre cut in,
they may attend, you are wise to think of such measures. Come, my mother is waiting.
She led them through the many twisting corridors and finally into a dark chamber, the floor almost completely taken up by the huge summoning circle painted there in what looked suspiciously like blood, a small altar set before it and bearing the 3 glowing eggs. Argilus was overseeing the final touches to the ritual circle, the woman looking up as they arrived.
You have come, Vuldren, good. We may finally begin.
She dismissed the handmaidens with but a gesture, the priestesses hurrying to close the door behind them as Argilus raised her hands, the charge of magic making Fritha's hair rise as the energies about them increased.
Oh, Lord of the Abyss, I beseech you, come before us.
The circle at their feet was glowing fiercely, casting the whole room blood-red in its glow when a flash and he was before them, the huge black demon stooped slightly and wings hemmed in, his sheer size making the once spacious room seem tiny. He did not look pleased.
You have wrested me from my plane, Darkling. This insult had better have great recompense or I shall take my vengeance in blood.
Even Argilus looked frightened, the woman stepping forward with a hasty bow.
I have great reason, O Lord of Fiends. I beseech you, lend your might to the drow in the coming war against the surface elves and for it I shall offer you these, eggs of a hated silver dragon, a foul creature of righteous light.
The demon smiled, gazing down at the altar, Feyre's cruel delight reflected in his face.
Foolish Darkling, you may be tricked by such simplistic deceptions, but I am not.
Argilus was backing away, the woman trembling.
What do you mean? These are false.
She died with barely a scream, consumed in a flash of fire that left only the charred remains of her clothes and jewelry. The demon turned to Feyre, the woman hastening to remove the large bag slung at her hip.
So, Darkling daughter, I sense you too have an offering for me. I have, O Lord, the eggs you seek are here. I offer them as tithe for your service.
The demon was still grinning, every sharp black tooth gleaming as he began to laugh.
A great trick has been played upon you, darkling daughter. The eggs you hold are also false.
Feyre whirled to her, face lit with a wild fury.
What? Vuldren, what have you?
Her outrage was cut short with her life. Frithla crouched down to where the body had been, slowly drawing a rope of blackened pearls from the charred remains of her armor.
I have betrayed you, Feyre.
An
entertaining encounter this has been,
mused the demon as she straightened.
So, what would you have now, Bhaal child?
Frithla sighed.
Your summoners are dead, leave this place.
He disappeared in a flash of flames, the room suddenly dark as the light from the runes faded. Frithla turned to the others, Imoen and Jaehaera stood silent beside her in the gloom.
Fall in behind me, speak not a word if we are stopped, and if I go for my sword, prepare to run.
To think he had awoken that morning contemplating just another day of his new life in exile, considering his limited options, whether go to surface as Vuldren had offered or stay in Underdark and try to seek out others of his kind, ones who also believed the Drow had lost their way and who perhaps sought to worship a different kind of divinity outside that of the insatiable, jealous Lolth. And then Solafane had heard that Vuldren had been led to the temple in disgrace and his fear had shown him his answer. Such a strange day spent with her and the others of her company. They had been quiet, though not unwelcoming, in fact, they had barely acknowledged his presence, all caught up in their own concerns as they were. To think, when he had awoken that morning that by the following one he would be stood with allies of his own before a great silver dragon. The beast, Adeline, had been overjoyed by the return of her eggs, the creature taking the clutch gently into her mouth and carrying them far back into the depths of her lair before rejoining them. She was behind him now, waiting as they were for their final three to arrive. Solafane glanced back, letting his eyes drink in the sight of her softly glowing scales before he returned his gaze to the blackness of the stairwell. It did not hurt to look upon her light, but it was uncomfortable after a while. He would need to get used to that though. The sun of the surface would be his enemy for some time to come. He hoped it would not make a burden of him. Those about him were still wearing the dragon's disguises, his companions familiar in form even if not in manner, the male, Anomen, pacing nervously before the steps, Aery stood with Herdalis, the couple talking quietly while the two remaining males, Valigar and Minsk were also in conversation, the pair casting wary glances at him, though Solafane ignored them. There was a tension to the air and he felt it too. It had been a long time since he had felt fear for someone other than himself, it brought back memories he would have preferred to forget. He heard them before he saw them, the light patter of hurriedly descending footsteps clearly catching Anomen's ears too, the man whirling to the stairs as the three women stepped down into the chamber.
Frithla.
There was enough emotion in his voice to halt her, the girl pausing to let the two women precede her like a shield as the others gathered about them, Aery looking almost tearful as she embraced the two women.
Oh, we were so worried. What happened?
Pressed Valigar.
Did everything go according to plan?
Yes, Imoen announced proudly,
in that Feyre got just what she had coming to her.
Frithla glanced to Solafane, but said nothing, Jaehaera continuing more helpfully.
All went as hoped. The demon was summoned and then killed both Feyre and Argelis for the affront. Our departure from the temple was noted, but not halted, at the pace Frithla was setting perhaps they felt it would be unwise to delay our errand. I don't believe the city is as yet alerted to their deaths, though I doubt it will remain that way for long.
The group seemed to turn instinctively to Adeline, the dragon dipping her great silver head before Frithla.
You have returned, godchild, and with your companions came my eggs. You sacrificed much for them and I am truly grateful. I am sorry I tricked you, but my desperation was great and it was the only path to them I could see.
Frith's expression was cold.
You can lie to me, you can trick me, you can delay my own recovery, send me into that city and watch as I become the worst of them, all for your benefit, but do not insult me with apologies.
The dragon nodded, she looked rather sad.
You are bitter, I understand and will delay you no more. I will work my way along the tunnel I once guarded where the drow and their surfacer cousins fight even now and aid the elves where I may. However, I would not suggest you join this battle, when either side are as likely to have a blade for you. Your drow ally here may be able to find you a safer path to the surface. And what of this illusion?
Asked a gnomon, more than one of the others looking eager for Adelin's answer.
The illusion will end once you leave the Underdark.
She turned to Fritha, golden eyes grave.
I hope you find what you seek in the end, godchild.
Solifane ducked the tree root that twisted down from the tunnel roof. They were growing close now, the rock finally given way to earth, the air damp and rich with the scent of it as they climbed. He had led them through the Underdark at a breathless pace, making for the last tunnel he had used to reach the surface himself, Solifane praying that the shifting grounds of the area had not closed it since. The gods were listening and they had been traveling steadily upwards for the last couple of hours, the way narrow and hard, a nervous energy building in him with every step. So many things were about to change forever. He was at the back of their group now, no need to lead the way when there was only one path to follow, and he let his eyes linger on the fine mist of hair that was swinging before him as Fritha clambered over roots and rocks just ahead of him. She was different. Not in form but attitude, no longer the confident female who had stalked about his city. The fearlessness he had found so attractive still remained, but it was coupled with an uncaring weariness now, as though she was not afraid simply because she had nothing left to lose. He grabbed the root above him to aid his step, the girl glancing back at the deluge of earth to catch him watching.
What is it?
Nothing, he lied and, deciding it was as good a time as any to ask her, continued,
I was just thinking, when did you realize I was not as my kin?
Fritha shrugged.
It was just a feeling I had. When Feyre discovered you had not joined us in slaughtering the gnome patrol, you did not tell her it had been my suggestion you ignore her orders. I suppose then was when I first began to suspect.
Solifane snorted crossly.
I was a fool to let Feyre catch me, and even more of one when I lost my temper with her in the middle of the tavern, as the handmaidens at the temple were keen to show me. Though I need not speak to you of their fervor when it comes to punishing transgressions. It was cleverly done, very little would have torn Feyre from her apartments once the eggs were there. You seem to have a knack for reading people.
She turned back to their path, stooping to duck beneath another gnarled root.
I understand hatred. Love you or loathe you, you were still one of the few people in that city Feyre cared about. I knew she would not be able to help but want revenge on me, however much I denied the rumors.
Solifane nodded slowly.
Yes, I noticed your companions did not believe it either. I made no move to correct them, though I do wonder, knowing now what you are, why you lay with me in the first instance.
Fritha frowned, her yellow eyes taking on an absent look as she considered it.
I don't know, I just felt like it, I suppose. I've been wandering about for an age now with my virginity hanging on me like an albatross. Who knew when a better opportunity would arise? Merely that? I am sure any male would be pleased to share your bed. And what makes you say that? This form, you know, is but an illusion. I could be hideously ugly.
Solifane swallowed, unaccustomed to feelings so awkward. He had never considered that.
Well, are you?
The girl shrugged absently.
No, I suppose not. Some would even say quite fair.
He stared at her, trying to picture another face, another body behind the one with which he was so intimately familiar.
What do you look like?
A ghost of a smile.
I am pale and short even for my race, with long gingery hair and a beard which I wear in 2 braids, an beard.
She nodded matter-of-factly.
Yes, I am a dwarf, of course. Fritha, a proud member of the Stoneforger clan. Oh!
Came a delighted cry from their head, the girl, Imoen, peering upwards through a break in the earth.
I think I can see light, we're here.
A feverish few moments of scrambling and they finally emerged sweating and grazed in the middle of a forest clearing, an inky sky of dark grey clouds visible through the web of branches. There was no moon, but even that could not mar the sudden swell of feeling in his heart, the air cold and damp and a breath of life across his soul. The joy about him was tangible. Solafane could not understand them, could not even recognize them, Odolin's spell fading to leave skins and mouths their own once more, though their happiness was clear in any tongue, a bubbling merry chatter much punctuated by the laughter of the pink-haired girl. And then it stopped, a half-dozen elven scouts appearing from the undergrowth, each one heavily armed with bows held ready.
Stand where you are and make no move towards your weapons. We are not your enemies,
a tall, half-elven female began, though she was not allowed to finish.
Silence! All will be held here while the general is informed. Any resistance will be met with force.
And with that, 2 of the elves were sent for the general, the rest remaining there on guard, though no one of his company seemed particularly troubled. After what they had faced recently, the situation was likely little more than inconvenience. Solafane glanced to the sky, the darkness there giving no hint at the blazing light it would soon enough become. A few hours and he would be blind to that world, and he cast about their knees, the surfacer common feeling strange in his mouth as he asked of the pink-haired girl at his side,
Ah, where is your leader, Fritha?
She sent him a bemused frown.
Fritha? She's over there, mate.
He followed her hand across the clearing to a huge bald warrior, the man shifting slightly as a dark-skinned male addressed him, and there she was, a young, fair half-elf, her warm copper curls still arranged with the ornaments as they had been as a drow. She turned from where she had been speaking to the blue-haired man at her side, her dark eyes looking black in the gloom, and sent him a one-half smile. Solafane laughed. End of chapter.